The year is 1877. The place is the Bear Paw Mountains of Montana, just 40 miles from the Canadian border. A band of starving, freezing, exhausted Nez Perce men, women, and children have been on the run for over 3 months. They have traveled over 1,400 miles through Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana. They have crossed the Rocky Mountains. They have fought 4 major battles against the United States Army. They have outmaneuvered and outfought over 2,000 soldiers. They have done the impossible, but now they are trapped. The army has surrounded them. Snow is falling. Their horses are dead. Their food is gone. Their wounded are dying from exposure. The children are crying from hunger. The old ones are begging for the end. The war chief, Looking Glass, has been killed. The great warrior Yellow Wolf is wounded. The women are digging roots from the frozen ground with their bare hands. There is no hope. There is no escape. And the man who has led them, not as a war chief, but as a peace chief, a leader chosen for his wisdom, not his ferocity, knows that the time for fighting is over. His name is Chief Joseph. The Nez Perce call him Hin-mah-too-yah-lat-kekt, thunder rolling down the mountain. The Americans call him the Red Napoleon. He is 40 years old. He has never wanted war. He has wanted only peace, only a homeland for his people, only the right to live where his ancestors are buried. But the United States government broke every treaty, stole every promise, and forced his people onto the path of blood. Now, surrounded, starving, with the last of his warriors dying around him, Chief Joseph makes a decision that will echo through history. He will not sacrifice the children. He will not sacrifice the wounded. He will not sacrifice the old ones. He will surrender. He walks to the camp of General Oliver Otis Howard, the same general he has evaded for 3 months, and hands him his rifle. Then he speaks. His words are recorded by the general's aide. He says, "I am tired of fighting. Our chiefs are killed. Looking Glass is dead. The old men are all dead. It is cold, and we have no blankets. The little children are freezing to death. My people, some of them, have run away to the hills and have no blankets, no food. No one knows where they are, perhaps freezing to death. I want to have time to look for my children and see how many of them I can find. Maybe I shall find them among the dead. Hear me, my chiefs. I am tired. My heart is sick and sad. From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever." Those words, "I will fight no more forever," become the epitaph of the Nez Perce War. Chief Joseph surrenders. His people are sent to a reservation in Oklahoma, far from their homeland. They die by the hundreds from disease. Joseph spends the rest of his life trying to bring his people home. He never succeeds. But his speech, his leadership, his legendary retreat, one of the greatest military feats in American history, makes him a hero not just to his own people, but to everyone who has ever fought for justice and lost. This is the story of Chief Joseph, the leader who never wanted war. The peace chief who became a warrior to save his people, the man who fought no more forever and who never stopped fighting in his own way until the day he died. To understand Chief Joseph, you must first understand the Nez Perce people. The Nez Perce lived in the Columbia River Plateau, what is now northeastern Oregon, southeastern Washington, and western Idaho. They were not a single tribe in the European sense. They were a confederation of bands, each with its own chief, its own territory, its own dialect. They were skilled horsemen. They had some of the finest horses in North America, the Appaloosa breed. They were fishermen, hunters, and gatherers. They were peaceful by nature, but they could fight when necessary. In 1855, the Nez Perce signed a treaty with the United States government, creating a reservation that preserved most of their ancestral lands. The government promised that the reservation would be theirs for as long as the rivers run and the grass grows. But in 1860, gold was discovered on Nez Perce land. White miners flooded in. The government, pressured by settlers and prospectors, demanded a new treaty in 1863. This treaty reduced the Nez Perce reservation by 90%, from 7 million acres to 700,000. It took away the Wallowa Valley, the most sacred homeland of the Nez Perce, where their ancestors had lived for generations. The government said the Nez Perce had agreed to the treaty. Some bands had, others had not. The bands that refused to sign, including Chief Joseph's band, were called the Non-Treaty Nez Perce. They refused to leave the Wallowa Valley for 14 years. They lived in an uneasy peace with the settlers who flooded into their lands. But the pressure never stopped. In 1877, the government gave the non-treaty Nez Perce an ultimatum: move to the reservation by June 14th, or be removed by force. Chief Joseph, who had taken over leadership of his band after his father's death in 1871, tried to negotiate. His father, Old Joseph, had never signed the treaty. Old Joseph had made his son promise, "You must never sell the bones of your father and your mother." Chief Joseph intended to keep that promise, but he also wanted peace. He prepared to move his people to the reservation, hoping to avoid war. Then tragedy struck. A group of young Nez Perce warriors, angry about the loss of their land, raided white settlements. They killed several settlers. The war that Joseph had tried to prevent had begun. Chief Joseph was not a war chief. He was a peace chief. His role was to negotiate, to counsel, to preserve the people. War leadership fell to others, to Looking Glass, to White Bird, to Joseph's own brother, Ollicott. But when the war began, Joseph led. He did not lead from the rear. He rode with his warriors. He fought with them. He counseled them. He prayed with them. And he made the strategic decisions that turned a desperate flight into one of the most remarkable military campaigns in history. The Nez Perce War lasted from June to October 1877. The Nez Perce warriors numbered perhaps 250, never more than 300. They were pursued by over 2,000 U.S. Army regulars, volunteers, and Indian scouts. The army was led by General Oliver Otis Howard, a veteran of the Civil War. Howard had more men, more guns, more ammunition, and more supplies. The Nez Perce had what they could carry on their horses, and their horses were the best on the continent. They also had the advantage of knowing the terrain. They knew every pass, every river crossing, every hidden trail. And they had leaders who refused to panic. The first major battle was at White Bird Canyon on June 17, 1877. The army sent a force of cavalry and infantry to attack the Nez Perce camp. The Nez Perce, hidden in the canyon, opened fire. The soldiers who had expected a quick victory were ambushed. They fled. 34 soldiers were killed. The Nez Perce lost only 3 warriors. The army had underestimated the Nez Perce. They would not make that mistake again, but they would still lose. The Nez Perce then began their long retreat. They crossed the Salmon River, then the Clearwater, then the Bitterroot Mountains. At the Battle of the Clearwater on July 11th, the army caught up with them. The fighting lasted all day. The Nez Perce held their positions, then slipped away in the night. At the Battle of the Big Hole on August 9th, Colonel John Gibbon attacked the Nez Perce camp at dawn. The soldiers killed many women and children before the warriors could organize. The Nez Perce counterattacked, driving Gibbon's men into a defensive perimeter. After a 2-day siege, the Nez Perce slipped away again. They had lost many people, perhaps 90 dead, including women and children. But they were still moving. They crossed into Yellowstone National Park, a brand new park not yet protected, and surprised a group of tourists. They did not harm the tourists. They took some food and horses and moved on. The American public, reading the newspapers, was fascinated. Who were these Indians who could outrun the army, outfight the army, and still treat civilians with decency? The legend of Chief Joseph began to grow. The Nez Perce headed east, then north toward Canada. In Canada, they would be safe. The Canadian government, unlike the American, had not yet forced its indigenous peoples onto reservations. The Nez Perce hoped to join Sitting Bull's Sioux, who had fled to Canada after the Battle of the Little Bighorn. They were close, so close they could see the border, but the army had one more trick. General Howard sent a telegram to Colonel Nelson Miles, a young, aggressive commander based in Montana. Miles cut off the Nez Perce's path to Canada. He trapped them in the Bear Paw Mountains, just 40 miles from the border. The battle at Bear Paw began on September 30th, 1877. The Nez Perce, exhausted and freezing, fought fiercely. They held their positions for 5 days. They killed Miles's chief of scouts and wounded Miles himself. But they could not break through. On the 5th day, Looking Glass was killed. The war chiefs were gone. The ammunition was gone. The food was gone. The children were dying of exposure. Chief Joseph, who had always spoken for peace, who had tried to avoid war, who had led his people not with fury but with wisdom, made the only decision he could. He walked to General Howard's camp. Howard had arrived by then and surrendered. He gave his rifle to General Howard. Howard, impressed by Joseph's dignity, gave the rifle to his own aide and said, "You have fought bravely, and you have nothing to be ashamed of." Then Joseph spoke the words that would make him immortal. "From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever." It was not a surrender of cowardice. It was a surrender of love, love for his children, his wounded, his elders. He had done what no other Native American leader had done. He had led his people on a 400-mile retreat, fought 4 major battles, and lost only 150 people, a tiny fraction of his band. He had outrun and outfought the United States Army. He had lost, not because he was defeated in battle, but because he chose to save lives instead of sacrificing them for pride. The aftermath of the surrender was bitter. The Nez Perce were not allowed to return to Idaho. They were sent first to Kansas, then to Oklahoma, Indian Territory as it was called. The climate was different. The diseases were different. The Nez Perce, accustomed to the cool mountains of the Northwest, died by the hundreds in the heat and humidity of Oklahoma. Chief Joseph begged to be allowed to go home. He traveled to Washington, D.C., met with President Rutherford B. Hayes, and pleaded his case. Hayes refused. Joseph met with President James Garfield. Garfield refused. Joseph met with President Chester A. Arthur. Arthur refused. In 1885, the Nez Perce were finally allowed to return to the Northwest, but only to a reservation in Washington state, far from the Wallowa Valley. Joseph was not allowed to live there. He was separated from most of his people and sent to a different reservation, where he lived alone, apart from the band he had led. He continued to speak. He continued to plead for justice. In 1903, he traveled to Washington, D.C. again. He was now an old man. He had become a celebrity. His photograph was sold in stores, his speeches were reprinted in newspapers. But he was still a prisoner. He was still far from the Wallowa Valley. On September 21st, 1904, Chief Joseph died. The official cause was a broken heart, a hemorrhage, the doctors said. His people believe he died of a broken heart. He was buried in Nez Perce, Washington, on the Colville Reservation. His grave is simple, marked with a stone and a plaque. But his words, "I will fight no more forever," are carved into the memory of the world. So what can we learn from Chief Joseph? First, that leadership is not about strength, but about wisdom. Joseph was not the greatest warrior of the Nez Perce. He was not the best shot, the best rider, the best tactician. He was the wisest. He knew when to fight and when to stop. He knew that protecting the children was more important than winning a battle. He knew that surrender in the right circumstances is not cowardice, but courage. Second, that words can be weapons. Joseph's surrender speech is only a few sentences long, but those sentences have inspired generations. They have been quoted by civil rights leaders, by politicians, by soldiers, by ordinary people facing impossible odds. A few well-chosen words, spoken from the heart, can outlast armies. Third, that justice delayed is justice denied. Joseph spent the last 27 years of his life fighting for the return of his homeland. He never succeeded. The Wallowa Valley is still not in Nez Perce hands, but his fight inspired others. The cause of Native American rights, ignored for so long, gained a voice through Joseph. He did not live to see justice, but he planted the seeds. Fourth, that retreat is not defeat. The Nez Perce retreat is studied at military academies around the world as a masterpiece of strategy. But it is also studied as a masterpiece of humanity. Joseph did not abandon his wounded. He did not abandon his elderly. He did not abandon his children. He brought them with him, fed them, protected them, and when he could do no more, he surrendered to save them. That is not defeat. That is love. Fifth, that a leader's greatest legacy is not what he does in war, but what he does in peace. Joseph is remembered for his surrender speech, not for his battles. He is remembered for his dignity, his wisdom, his refusal to hate even those who had stolen his homeland. He is remembered as a man who, in the face of overwhelming injustice, remained human. That is the greatest legacy of all. Today, you can visit the Chief Joseph Memorial in Nez Perce, Washington. You can walk the Nez Perce National Historical Park, which preserves the sites of the retreat. You can stand at Bear Paw Battlefield, where Joseph surrendered, and look toward the Canadian border, 40 miles away, so close you can almost see it. You can read his speeches, his letters, his pleas for justice, and you can ask yourself, what would you do if you were in his place? If your homeland was stolen, if your children were freezing, if your people were dying, would you have the wisdom to know when to stop? Would you have the courage to say, "I will fight no more forever"? Chief Joseph did. He fought for his people with everything he had, not just with a rifle, but with his heart, his mind, and his voice. He lost the war. He lost his homeland. He lost his people. But he won something else. He won history. He won memory. He won the respect of the nation that defeated him. And that, perhaps, is the only victory that matters in the end. The legendary retreat, the surrender speech, the man who would not break even when everything was taken from him, Chief Joseph, thunder rolling down the mountain. From where the sun now stands, he will fight no more forever. But his legend, his courage, his wisdom, his humanity will fight for him, for all of us, as long as there are people who believe that justice is worth pursuing, even in defeat. That is the story of Chief Joseph, the Nez Perce leader who lost everything and became immortal. I will fight no more forever, but his memory fights on. And it will never, ever surrender.